Sit right down and I'll show you where my dreams began.
I'm Michael Dugan, your culinary host, guiding you through the chef's journey. Join me at the chef's table, where you'll experience stories, secret sauces, signature dishes, and kitchen disasters. Welcome back to part 2 with Chef James Trees as we follow along his culinary journey with the Food Channel and Gordon Ramsay, Hell's Kitchen, and Kitchen Nightmares.
Chopped was like a few people around town. I'd gotten back to Las Vegas, and a few of my friends were getting asked to do it. And somehow they got my email and sent me an email, and they asked me if I wanted to do it. And I was like, no, not really. I don't really want to do Chopped. I've never seen the show. And I was like, okay, cool. And I was like, but they're like, hey, we'll fly you out to New York. And I was like, there's this restaurant I've always wanted to go to in New York that didn't exist when I lived there. So I'll go out there and you'll fly me out and put me up. Awesome. So I went out there and I got to go eat at Upland, which is at the time was Justin Smiley's restaurant. And that he was the chef at Alimentari e Vineria, Great Jones. And it's still there. It's a great restaurant. Okay. But he was the one who started that. And then he moved over and opened a restaurant called Upland because he was from Upland, California. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to go to that restaurant. So I went to go do Chopped in order just to get to this restaurant. And so I come in, I get to my hotel room, I go to sleep, wake up the next morning at 4 a.m. You got to go down and they like meet you at some McDonald's. And then they're like, okay, you're all here. Come on over. And they walk you in. They tell you to put on the Chopped uniform and all that stuff. Okay. They're like, okay, cool. All right, we're going to start. And I was like, okay. I raised my hand. And they're like, you don't have to raise your hand. And I'm like, how does this work? What are we doing? It was the 23rd season of Chopped, I found out.
Oh, my gosh.
And apparently I should have been more up on how this whole thing worked.
Right, sure.
So I got to experience Chopped the first time as being completely blind. I had no idea how anything worked. Okay. I didn't know that there were rounds. I didn't know that there were secret ingredients. I didn't know. Right. I didn't know anything.
And difficult ingredients, not just secret.
Yeah, they gave us
difficult ones.
Yeah, they gave us like veal testicles as like the first. Yeah, is the first thing, and I'm like, okay, cool. I'll try to do something with this. So I did the best I could. I didn't get eliminated the first round, and I was like, okay, cool. And then the second round was a fish course, and I somehow got through that too. And then I got the dessert, and then the other people on the show with me had seen every episode.
Of course, yeah, of course.
Every single thing about every judge. They were following them on Instagram. At that point, I don't even think I had an Instagram. No, wow. And they knew who the judges were because they were stalking them on Instagram. And I walk in and I'm like, oh, it's Chris Santos. I'm like, hey, Chris, how are you doing, man? And then, oh, it's Scott Conan. I'm like, hey, Chef, how you doing? Good to see you. And then Alexander Garnishelli. And I was like, I don't know you. And they're like, oh, okay. And then the kids who I was competing with, they were much younger than me. Okay. They knew everything. They knew Scott Conan doesn't like this, and Alexandra Garnishelli doesn't like this. And
interesting.
Cook like this and cook that way. And I was just like, okay, that would have been nice to know. Yeah. Right. And honestly, I think I've seen now 3 episodes of Chopped. Like I haven't really watched it all the way through. Yeah. Yeah. But that was it was a wake up call, and it was fun. And then they wanted to debrief me after the taping. Sure. And they're like, oh, we need you for 3 more hours. And I just looked at them. I was like, I have a 7:30 dinner reservation, so you have me until 6:45.
Wow. Okay.
And they're like, but you can't. I was like, no. I'm leaving at 6:45. Because I didn't at that point. I know I didn't win, so it's not worth staying around.
Oh my gosh, that's a cool experience. But you went back to the Food Channel too. I know you've done a couple other.
Yeah, I did. Chopped was the last thing I did.
Oh, okay.
And then the one before that, I did something called Chef Hunter. Once again. Like a total weird premise. There's that girl with the frosty white hair. I don't know what her name was.
Amber Out. Is it Amber?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we did a thing called Chef Hunter, which is basically a job application show. And so it's a cooking job application show, which,
weird.
I didn't know that was ridiculous. Yeah. So that one, once again, didn't know what was going on, didn't know who this person was. And I remember we were shooting at Le Cirque, and we were like, we'd already gone through the first 2 rounds, and it was the final dinner service. And I had gotten to know the other contestants, and the contestant I was going up against was the chef de cuisine of Le Cirque's restaurant in the Caribbean, right?
Oh, wow.
And they had basically already promised him the job. And I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to have some fun with it, whatever. So we're in there, we're doing dinner service, we're going through our normal stuff. They kind of mess with you and get you to do other things and all this stuff. I'm like, okay, whatever.
Okay.
And I remember that Amberell came up to me during shooting, during the taping of the final dinner service. I was talking to Mauro Macchioni, who is one of the Macchioni brothers, Sirio's sons. And she came up and she was like, your service is going off the rails, and you have all this pressure. Are you gonna do something about it? And I looked at her dead in her face, and I just said this. I said, ma'am, I don't know who you are, but I do know that the person that's on my hot app station right now that's struggling with his cook right now is the chef de cuisine of Le Cirque in New York. And
oh my gosh.
And I was like, and I'm not going to go over there and raise my voice to the chef de cuisine of Le Cirque in New York. I was like, I am not that person, and I will never be that person. Yeah. And I was like, and if you want your fake TV drama, go elsewhere. And she literally looked at Mauro Macchioni, and Mauro just shrugs it off and says, he's right. And she did not speak to me for the entire rest of the taping.
Wow.
And then the other thing I did, and this was like a few years before that actually, was I was part of Gordon Ramsay's kitchen team that did Hell's Kitchen and Kitchen Nightmares.
We got to talk about that. I mean, I know, I've been dying to know, and I know that our listeners and your listeners want to hear about it. So let's dive in. Yeah. How did this come about?
I was the chef de cuisine at Michael Mina's restaurant 14 on Sunset Boulevard when it existed. And that was a thing with SBE. They were turning that restaurant into a club, and there was nothing I could really do about it. So I was a little bit disheartened by it. And so I wasn't the funnest person to be around. I basically got fired from that for doing something stupid. Let's just say that. And so, I went in and went to go hand in my, my keys and everything, get my final check. And I saw my friend Andrea, who was the sous chef on Hell's Kitchen, the blonde girl.
Oh.
She's an amazing friend of mine. I've known her for 15 years. And
cool.
She said, hey, we're going to do a season of Hell's Kitchen. Do you want to, do that? And I was like, I've never done TV, and I don't think that's for me. I run restaurants. And she's like, you might like it, blah, blah. So I came over, and she's like, all right, we have to do all this prep. And we did all this prep. And then basically what we found out was the cooks and the people who were a part of Hell's Kitchen were so bad.
Yeah.
They couldn't get food out of the kitchen. They couldn't communicate when the food came out wrong. They overcooked, undercooked, whatever. Gosh. They were just basically chosen by producers for the amount of craziness they can bring to the situation.
Okay.
Gordon had a bunch of VIPs that he needed to feed because he told his VIPs to come over and eat. It'd be like David Beckham and, Robbie Williams and all these mega stars and all these A-list stars. And so we were like, we can cook for them too. Do you want them to have things off the menu? And Gordon's like, no, the menu's stupid. It's beef Wellingtons and seared scallops.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, cool. I was like, so do you mind if we just make a menu and serve them from the back? And he's like, yeah, please do.
Oh my God.
We would set up a pass and run almost like a Michelin-starred kitchen out of back of this TV set for about 20 to 30 people per taping, which is every day.
Okay.
And every day we would do the normal prep for the guys who were doing the TV show. And then we would be cooking in the back and making sure that people who are VIPs got a good meal and got to hang out. And eventually Gordon got really comfortable with that, and he would start bringing them back and introducing them to the cooks who were cooking the food because people were asking about it. And then we find out that they were when Scarlett Johansson came by, she remembered me from meeting me at 14.
Oh.
She was really cool. And, it was a really cool time to be a part of that.
Wow.
And then from that, he asked us to be a part of Kitchen Nightmares because his first seasons of Kitchen Nightmares were so poorly run that none of the restaurants even survived, by the time that they actually got onto television.
Really?
And I was like, okay, cool. So maybe we can help these guys out. And so I took that on with the 100% intention of being able to help people out who probably shouldn't be in the restaurant business, but are there and now they need some help. And I thought that's what we were doing. And I thought that was really cool. So that's what, I signed up to do. And the first season we went in and it was me and Andy brought me on with her and I brought my friends, Jeff Thomas and Stephen Ryan Foley. And we went out and we, help these people. And it was awesome because we would go into these nightmare kitchens that were gross and we would clean them and show them how everything works and show them how to set up a pass and show them how expoing works and how tickets work. And people were really receptive and we got to cook really cool food. And that was awesome. And we got to write the menus. And that was like, and so that was an amazing time. And then they're like, you guys did such a good job. You should help us with the second season or the third season. And so the third season, they actually flew me around the country to go try places and see if we could help them. And so I would go in and I'd write reports about here's their financial situation, here's their food, here's their kitchen, here are the people who work here, here's their problems. I would do these whole entire big reports and then I would send it off to the guys. And during the third season, what I realized is they didn't care if they could help anybody. All they wanted to do was make a really, let's put it like this, a really high stress level television show. Yeah. And the producers were producing that rather than us trying to help people. It was more about the emotion and the chaos of what we were doing. And I really got disheartened with it in that third season. And I remember that we were my last episode that I did was in Anaheim. There was a place that was called Luigi's or something. Right? And we had gone through and this was like a neighborhood restaurant. It should have never been anything more than that. And they wanted to elevate things. But I could just tell after meeting these guys that they were not going to listen to anything that we did. They weren't paying attention. We had gotten there 4 or 5 a.m., gone in, cleaned their kitchen, taken all the mise en place that we prepped, put it into the stations. We had sat there and trained them for 5 or 6 hours. And at the end of it, I literally went to Gordon and I said, Chef, these people are not going to listen to what we have to say. The moment we leave this kitchen, they're going to start cooking however they want. Revert back. Yeah. And I knew it. And the thing was, they were just there because it was a TV show, right? Not because they thought that we could help them. Yeah. And it's exactly what happened. That's tough. And Gordon came out and he was all pissed off because obviously they were failing and things were coming out of the kitchen and everything was wrong. And he, the owner started cooking things from the old menu, literally right in the middle of that service. And to show that he could cook better in his, just a ridiculous ego move, right? Yeah. Than what we were trying to show them. So does he have a really big ego? Or is that just Gordon? No, but Gordon was furious. I can imagine he would be. He tried to lace me, and I just turned around and I just gave it back to him. I was like, I fucking told you this was going to happen. This is bullshit. You have no reason blaming me. I was like, you guys, your producers keep putting us in this stupid position, and I don't understand why they would do this. I was like, it's not fair. I was like, this is bullshit. And there's no reason that, and he's like, well, you should have trained them better. I'm like, you spent 5 hours training these clowns. I don't know what to tell you. And I was like, fuck this. I'm out of here. I literally got in my car and drove from Anaheim back to my apartment in Venice. Wow. And that was the last time I worked with Gordon Ramsay. Yeah. He tried to blame some bullshit that his production team, it was 100% their fault. Right. And I think they did 2 more episodes, and then they got to that Amy's Baking Company, and that was the end of that show. They literally had to stop production because, me and a couple of my other buddies were just like, I'm not doing this anymore. I like the show, but I actually got stressed sometimes. Right, because and that's the thing is, it was unnecessarily stressful. Yeah. And here's the thing is, the thing that you don't see on the television show is that we already have a menu planned. Before we show up to this place, because I've already done the scouting report. I know what kind of equipment they have. I know what kind of cooks they have. I know everything, right? I would write all these things. And then what I found out later on was after the first couple episodes, the production company stopped giving Gordon all the notes and all the reports that I was doing. And so he had no idea that this was going to be a total shit show.
Yeah.
And so I would find out what restaurants we were going to when I got like the call sheets and the plane tickets. It was basically like, get on a plane, fly somewhere, turn a restaurant over in 4 days, get on another plane, fly to another city, do another one, then fly to another city and do another one, then fly to another city and do another one. And you do them back to back to back to back because, Chef Gordon has so much stuff to do that it was like, okay, cool. You get him for 14 days. And here's how many episodes can we do? So that was the situation. And I mean, it was a really cool thing to do the first year.
Sure.
And then the second year, it just became a bunch of what all food television has really become, which is about, it's about egos. It's about, not helping people. It's about basically producing a show that's going to get ratings.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, rather than, and I think we all know that, the less positive a kitchen situation will look on television, the better it is for television.
Yep.
And I really, having done this and made this, I feel bad because I feel like I was part of the degradation of my industry.
Yeah.
And I really look back on it with very, jaded glasses.
Okay. Still, it was very successful.
It was very successful.
And you helped make it successful. I mean, you should feel good about that. And you got to meet a lot of really interesting people, I'm sure.
One of the cool things I learned, because we were doing so much with so many different people, was I got to learn what not to do.
Yeah.
Going through and seeing these restaurants and meeting these families and these people who open these restaurants, I learned so many things and pitfalls about how restaurants go down a bad avenue and about the understanding the fundamentals of running a restaurant. Like I remember I would walk into these places and say, can I see your profit and loss statement? I need to know where you're at financially. 9 out of 10 of these places would not have a P&L. That is
nuts.
That's nuts. If you don't know where your money's going,
right?
How do you know what to fix?
Yeah, that's a good point.
People who are married, I'm sure they loved each other, but their stress from the restaurant just destroyed that marriage and destroyed their drive. And seeing the hotshot chef trying to sleep with all the servers and all the hostesses, right? Seeing all that shit. That's the kind of stuff that I saw that I was just like, oh man, don't do that.
Right.
I could write a book on what not to do in a restaurant.
Receive $10 off your next purchase with Voices for Chefs 10.
You don't know what to make for dinner again? You want to explore new cuisines, but you don't have time? What if you have new inspirations and we provide you with the ingredients and recipes? We know you want to travel, learn new foods, explore the world, but life's responsibilities keep getting in your way. What if you can bring those experiences to your home neatly packed into a box? Ladybug Collective is a subscription service that finds real people from around the world to create beautifully curated assortments of recipes, ingredients, and cultural content. Not only do we include cultural ingredients, but also a set of detailed recipe cards with instructions on how to use them. Each box also has a QR code that when scanned takes you to tons more global exploration to immerse yourself in. Everything from film to lifestyle, art to history, it all can be found here. Live your life to the fullest. Subscribe now and don't miss out on the next cultural adventure. Ladybug Collective. Always exploring.
You should. Create your own TV show. It's already been done. So circling back, one thing I do want to do is call out some of the people that you worked with along your culinary journey. Are there any chefs that you worked with that really stood out, that really mentored you or, inspired you to keep going?
I mean, obviously Luke Palladino at the beginning, who's still like one of my mentors today. I look to him for advice all the time. We even talk about the new restaurant opening happening in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
And he's giving me advice and helping me out. He has a wealth of knowledge that I will one day hope to be able to share with someone else. He's one of the ones, and he was truly inspirational. And I still use a lot of the recipes that I learned from him, because he was trained in Venice. He went to CIA, same as me. He trained in Venice, Italy. He's an amazing chef. He was going to be The most famous restaurant in Venice is Alcovo. He was the chef there, and he's just an amazing guy. Ray Garcia, he's like an amazing friend to me as well. I got to work with him at Fig in Santa Monica. I thought I loved the farmer's market until he gave me an unlimited budget to go to the farmer's market in Santa Monica and buy stuff. We were right next to the farmer's market.
Wow.
And I learned a lot about farmers and how they work from my time over there.
That's so cool.
Love Ray. He's an absolute magician when it comes to blending new American flavors with traditional Mexican food. So that was just an amazing time to spend with him. And I introduced him to his first partner, Jacob, who they went and opened Broken Spanish in LA. And that was a huge restaurant for Los Angeles. And then who else? Obviously Michael Mina. Can't talk about my career.
What was he like? Or what is he like?
He's a bro. He's great. He not only is he a chef, but he's like a mentor, and he's so smart. And he sees the restaurant business in a way that very, very few chefs see it. You look at the Mina group, and when I was with the Mina group, it was 6 of us that were sitting around a table, right? And now they have 40 plus restaurants, and they've spawned different branches of hospitality, consulting businesses, and doing all kinds of stuff. And all the people who are part of that group are now either, corporate chefs or own their own restaurants or different entrepreneurs in some way, or even run entire hotel groups. We had a really, really good group of human beings there. And that was probably, the joke goes that I was fired by Michael Mina 3 times. Right? I was fired when I first worked at Aqua, when I first came back to Vegas when I was 21. I worked for Mark LaRusso. And I got fired from that restaurant, and that was totally fair. I went to Bradley Ogden, and it was super successful, but sometimes wrong restaurant, wrong time. But I got to learn all of the Michael Mina classics, the mussel souffle, the tuna tartare, all of those different things, the filo crusted sole, the whole roasted foie gras, all these amazing dishes. And I remembered them because that's kind of the way I thought I was supposed to do, is to learn all the stuff. And it wasn't until 7 years later when I went back and they're like, "Oh, do you know how to do this?" And I would just do the prep and do the dish. And Michael would be like, "Wow, okay, cool. Teach that to everybody," because I already knew all the standards from way, way, way back when I was working with Mark LaRusso at Aqua. And this was before the Mina group was even a thing. So then I was on the corporate team, and then I ended up being sent off to the flagship in San Francisco and working with Chris Lahamadou. God rest his soul. I hated him and he hated me.
It happens.
Yeah, it was just a terrible position. I worked like a dog 7 days a week in a windowless basement with a dragon lady who was part of this hotel, who was super mean. And the only people who I got along with were the prep cooks, who I was down in the basement with, and I had to do all the ordering and cleaning and do all that stuff. And I remember that, I ended up getting into a fist fight with the chef of the restaurant.
Oh, wow.
And I remember I was on my way walking back to my apartment, and Anthony Karen, who was the corporate chef, calls me, and I'm furious. And I pick up the phone, and he's just laughing. He's laughing at me. And he's asked, "Yeah, you don't work there anymore?" And so I thought it was super funny. I was like, "Fuck this. I'm out of here." And I was still a hothead. I still wanted to be the best cook. And I was in this environment. We had 2 Michelin stars, and it was such a good thing. I wanted to be a part of it, and they just wouldn't let me be a part of it. And I was like, okay, cool. And so I left San Francisco and went down to Los Angeles, started working for Akasha Richmond. And then the 2008 financial crisis happened. I was working at a hotel, and just as a temporary thing, because I figured that was my safe place to be. And then all of a sudden, I get a phone call, and it's the corporate chef again, Anthony, and Fretz, who's one of my great buddies, who was the chef of the restaurant 14. And they're like, "Yeah, we're opening 14. Do you want to come on as chef de cuisine?" And I was like, "Absolutely." And then I got there, and then SBE got rid of Fretz, and Anthony was involved with other stuff, and I couldn't handle the fact they were turning that into a club, and then I got fired for the 3rd time.
Oh my gosh.
I was a bad employee. Let's put it like that.
But
a loyal soldier and a loyal friend, but a horrible employee.
But on the flip side, that makes you a great leader because you understand. Perspective.
I think you have to fail a lot in life in order to be successful.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, describe the environment of Esther's.
The environment at Esther's. So right now we have a 2,100 square foot restaurant. And, like you talk about numbers in a restaurant,
Mm-hmm.
a good restaurant does about $1,000 a square foot. So that's what I figured. So we actually should be doing about $2.1 million in revenue, and that would be considered successful. We did 6.3 last year.
Wow.
So we're at about 3,000 something square foot, right? Which is too much volume for space.
Yeah, because it's a small place.
It is. It's only 68 seats interior with a couple of patio seats. And I'll tell you, we just had a record week this last week with Valentine's Day, and we did 3,000 covers in a week, 3,003 covers actually, to be exact. And that is an average of 492 guests or 429 guests per day.
Oh my gosh.
Which is, it's just not tenable for the space, but we are moving into next door. But here's the thing that we do have. We have really great systems. We have really passionate people, both on the service, the side, the bar side, and the kitchen side. And I get to kind of play, P.T. Barnum to the three-ring circus that is Esther's Kitchen.
Okay.
So I'm a hype man, and I want to, make sure that everyone gets their due. I'm always calling out, the bar team and what a great job they do, and the service staff. As you can tell, you have to be a very passionate person to work at Esther's because it's a lot of pressure and it's a lot of food that's going out of that kitchen. And then at the same time, I have a team of chefs with me that are unparalleled in this industry. I feel like we have the best group of chefs that any restaurant could ever ask for.
Who are they?
So it starts at the top with Sean O'Hara, who's our executive chef.
Okay.
He just joined us about 6 months ago, but he's an amazing leader. Has already made amazing impacts on the restaurant. Nice. He came from Wisconsin. Prior to that, he was at the French Laundry for 6 years as a sous chef. You have my chef de cuisine, Dylan Jobs. Dylan and I met doing Coachella, doing an Outstanding in the Field dinner about 12 years ago. He was 21 at the time, or maybe he was like 20. Yeah, he's 21. Now he's 30. And I think he was 19 at the time, but now he's 30. And he's been with me. He ended up being one of my cooks in Los Angeles at Superba, where I was the corporate chef. And then I found out he was here, and I said, "Hey, what are you doing?" He's like, "I want to bake bread." And I was like, "Absolutely, come over."
Love it.
So he started as bread baker. Now he's our CDC. Pedro, who's the little guy who runs service at night. And he's also worked all the stations and everything else. Started as a cook. He's now our executive sous chef. He's been with me for about 5.5 years. And honestly, he's worked at amazing Italian restaurants from B&B, which was at the Venetian, Gaetano's. He worked at Ferraro's, amazing Italian cook. And just an amazing person to have as part of the team. Then you have Ram, who we already talked about, who's going to be the chef of the French restaurant.
Yeah,
he
Ram.
just moved to Los Angeles. Okay. Yeah, so right now he's a sous chef at Esther's, but he will be the executive chef of the French restaurant Bar Bohème that we're doing down the line.
Oh, fabulous.
Then you have, who else? Justin Cannon is just one of our AM sous chefs. He is a rock. He's super solid. He cares about everything. He's a really great teacher.
Nice.
And he's got a really great temperament for the kitchen. And then you have Corey, who's a kid who started as a dishwasher with us about 6 years ago. And I thought he was only going to last about 2 weeks. And I haven't been able to get rid of him since. And now he's a sous chef, and he's working with Chef Ram and Chef Justin. He's like our junior sous, and he's been coming up, and does everything. He's a great kid. And then around that, we have really talented cooks as well. I mean, that's the best thing that you could ever ask for. Is now we're starting to grow our own sous chefs, which is pretty amazing.
James, I wanted to just pause and give recognition to them because we don't do that. And that's what this show is all about,
And they're amazing.
That's so awesome. I just want to circle back to your restaurant. and say, we have never had better Italian food than in Italy. And we eat out Italian all over Seattle, all over the country, really. So I had no idea how good that food was going to be.
I had to throw you a curveball with the pasta fritti. That was when I was like, oh, you love Italian food? This is actual real Italian food.
It was amazing. And my wife was saying, ask him about how it originally created. So why don't we just talk about that really quick? You were talking about rocks, right?
Yeah.
Can you share that story? Because that's beautiful.
I just went to Italy about a year and a few months ago. It was the last time I was there. And I got to go with one of my mentors, who's Luke Palladino, who I worked with at the Mirage and Onda. And that was over 25 years ago. We've known each other for that long.
Okay.
And I got to go, and he took me we went to Venice, Rome. We stayed in Naples, and then we went like a little bit south of Naples to the Vico Quenza, which is really close to Amalfi and Sorrento, but it's on the Adriatic side.
Okay.
So it's a lot like more reasonable, right?
Yeah.
And we actually were going to go eat at this chef, Guido Pepe, his 1-star osteria in Campania. And unfortunately, they messed up our reservations. But the funny thing was we're staying at his villas that he has, like we're on the side of a mountain and Vesuvius is in the background, and it's amazing. And we're just hanging out there and going to restaurants and checking these things out. And they had messed up all of our reservations. We're like, oh, we have a reservation tomorrow at your restaurant. And Guido Pepe's like, no, you can't, because we have a buyout. There's no way. And we were like, oh man, we came here to eat some of your food. There's a couple of dishes that he does that are amazing.
Yeah.
But only like that, they're like his signature dishes. And what he ended up doing for us was cooking us lunch at his villas.
Oh, wow.
And where they make all the preserves, they grow all the food for the restaurants there.
Oh my God.
It's amazing. It's like on the side of a hill. It's a completely biodynamic organic farm. We were drinking wine that they were just pulling out of these glass fermenters.
Okay.
I mean, it was just an amazing experience. But he's like, when I was a kid, he told me the story. He's like, when he was a kid, he was so poor that his favorite dish was,
there it is. Yeah.
was pasta alla vongole. And but my mom couldn't afford clams. So he made us pasta alla vongole. But then he also made us, this is insane, he made us a dish that he makes where he takes rocks from the water of the shoreline.
Yeah.
And then replaces the clams in the dish with the rocks. So you actually cook the pasta with the rocks, because the flavor of all the plankton and all the growth on the outside of the rocks,
sea salt,
cooks into the pasta and adds that salinity and adds that flavor. And we were eating them side by side, and we're like, the one with the rocks is just as good as the one with the clams.
Oh my God. So awesome.
It was amazing, right? And then I asked him, I was like, and we had all this, because he made so much food. And he's feeding his mom, who's there, 94 years old, his daughter, who runs the villas and all that. And he was also cooking for them. I was like, what do you guys do with all the leftover pasta or anything that you make? And that's when he told me about the pasta fritti. And he's like, what we do is we almost make like a frittata, but with no eggs. They literally couldn't even afford to have eggs if they didn't have chickens and whatnot. So he showed me how he made this leftover pasta, and he actually wrote a book on what's called generational pasta in Italy. Just means leftover pasta. Right? And that's one of the dishes that he showed me. And I've been wanting to get that onto the menu at Esther's for about a year.
Wow.
Right? So finally we're like, oh, let's talk about this and that. And then that's how the dish came about.
Okay.
We wanted to take the scotcha off, which is like a rolled pizza that we like do it. And almost if you took pizza and turned it into a cinnamon roll. This is more like very straightforward, but you pan fry the pasta and then you create a crust on it by adding Parmesan, and the Parmesan melts and creates a frico, a crunchy outside.
That's
right?
Yeah. And that was underneath the pasta, I think. Oh my gosh. That was amazing.
It was underneath, on top. It's like the whole thing. And then we put a little bit more of the sauce, and we put like all the flavors of matriciana. So you have red onions, white wine, guanciale. We cure all of our guanciale in-house.
Okay.
And then so we mix all that with a little bit of our pomodoro, and then we puree it with a little bit of chili oil and garlic oil. And then that's the sauce that sits on. And then we do sunny side up eggs, because you got to have an egg for brunch.
Yep.
And then, and then that's how the dish comes around. And I mean, I really love not only the composition of that dish, but the fact that it's something that I've never seen anyone put on a restaurant menu. Like when we're looking for dishes and how we build them and how we do everything, we don't want, I mean, it'd be so easy to just take a few menu items off the lunch thing and throw them on there, or put a couple dinner menu items on, but like when you're talking about real creativity, you're talking about the humbleness of Italian food. Those things are very hard to have them intersect in a way that is as cognizantly together as that dish, the pasta fritti dish.
Yeah, that makes sense. And your sous chef brought it out, I remember. And I met your sous chef.
Yes, you met Rom. And so Rom, he's been with me for over a year and a half. He's going to be the chef at the French restaurant that we're opening down the street. But the funny thing is like when I started doing this dish, he started talking about this dish that comes from Persian culture. Okay. And he calls it macaroni.
Oh.
Which, I mean, that's cool. I was like, you're just saying macaroni weird. I don't know what you're talking about. Yeah. But his mom sent a picture to him of her making almost the exact same kind of dish, but in Persian culture, he's an Iranian Jew. He actually has that same dish in the lexicon of his family, and he grew up eating that dish.
Oh my gosh.
So he was blown away. He's like, where did you get the idea for this?
And he made it, didn't he?
Did he make it? Like, my mom used to make this dish.
James, did he make that one?
Yeah, he made that one.
Yeah, so he made it for us, and this was your dish. And oh my gosh, that was so special to connect with him too. I really just was so impressed.
I mean, the one thing I've learned is it doesn't matter how good a sous chef can cook.
Yeah.
One of the biggest flaws that we have in our industry is, and don't get me wrong, Ram is a hell of a cook. He can cook his ass off. But more importantly is that being the best cook in the kitchen does not set you up with the leadership skill set that you need in order to be a sous chef. The emotional maturity, the ability to work through problems and stuff like that, because line cooks are babies and they're selfish babies and they should be, because like the better a cook is, usually the more selfish that person is.
I remember.
You have to have your mise en place. You have to have your stuff ready. And what I found is like mentoring young sous chefs and chefs to get to the level where they understand that it's their job to be a good boss and not to cook the best food. Yeah. That's a different skill set for these guys.
They have to delegate. They have to pull back from being in that dish, and they have to let somebody else create it, and then maybe mentor them and guide them in creating it and let them fail.
It's funny because I just had to go in to work yesterday. I had to go into Esther's yesterday and have a conversation with two of my cooks. Two of my cooks who are in really different places in their lives.
Okay.
One who is ready to become a sous chef. He's that cook, and he's always set up, always ready, always has his backups, and he cooks great food, and his job cares so much about the quality of the food. And that is so important when you're a cook, right there. But in order to be right there, he's also treating this other cook like shit. And that's something that like, and I was like, hey man, I was like, I don't care how, it's like your job. I get it. You can cook. Like you've been with me for 5 years. I taught you how to cook. I gave you the skills. Now, if you want to move forward, you have to be able to look at someone who was where you were 2 or 3 years ago, and you have to bring them up to your level, not by beating them down, but by lifting them up. And that's where a sous chef's power is. That's where a manager's power is. And so much of our industry for the last 30 years has just been beat you down, tell you you're not good enough. And now I love to see the other side of that, where I see cooks who are teaching each other, helping each other grow, looking at each other as human beings rather than objects in their way of becoming what they want to be, which is the next level. And that's a different place to be at. And we look at that, and then you go back to the food, and the food is so simple. Yeah. It's such a small part of what restaurants are. And I told him, I was like, you guys have to work together, and you have to mentor him, and you have to be better to him, not worse. That was the best part of my week. Wow. Was seeing him realize that in order to grow, he had to allow other people to fail and help bring them up. That person's going to continue to grow and be awesome.
That's really amazing.
I wish I had more people like Renee around me who were figuring that out and moving up.
I agree. I mean, because I pivoted from the restaurant business. We had a drive-by shooting. I was in Napa Valley and an assistant manager. And
there was a drive-by shooting in Napa Valley?
Yeah, I know. There are gangs in Napa Valley, James. There are little kids, like 14, 15-year-old kids that carry guns. And I was shocked because I worked in a 24/7 upscale diner, basically. And the thing, it was a chain. And I'm not going to mention the name, but it changed my whole career. It was that catalyst that I had to manage that drive-by shooting as an assistant manager that night. I saw what I thought was a bullet go through the waitress's hair in the back. She was fluffing her hair and she thought it was a bug. It turned out it was her ex-boyfriend that was shooting at her through the window.
Oh my God.
And literally the cops came and I just had a mental breakdown 2 days later. And I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I left the business.
I mean, here's the thing is, I bet that was a catalyst for a decision you'd already made.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Because
that was just like, okay, this is the world telling me don't be here. And I've had a few moments like that in my life and in my career where it was like, oh, I think I should be here. I should, like when I went to the Fat Duck, I was working at the Fat Duck in London and they had never been immigration swept. And all of a sudden they showed up and I'm sitting there in an MGM Grand gold logoed fucking like chef coat with my name on. And they're like, I don't know, you and you come outside.
Wow.
And I was like, damn it. And they're like, oh, do you have your visa and your paperwork? And I was like, I don't have any of that. They're like, do you have a passport?
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, yeah. And they're like, cool. And they took it and they're like, we'll give this back to you on the plane on Wednesday when you go home and leave.
Oh, wow.
I mean, that was the situation where I thought I had pushed myself and I gotten to a certain point, thought that I was on the right track. And the world sometimes just says, nope.
That's part of what it was. And I floundered for a while to figure out what I wanted to do. And then I fell into technology. But what I wanted to share with you was this amazing thing is that the skills that I learned studying to be a chef, the skills that I learned in the kitchen were so powerful in technology because no one had them. Talk about leadership. Right. Yeah. I'm very passionate about what you're saying because
Absolutely.
I learned that in the kitchen. I learned how to relate to so many different kinds of people and how to think of what their motivations are, not what mine are. What are their motivations? What's driving them? What problem is going on at home? Is it drugs? Is it alcohol? Is it personal? Is it a relationship? What is it? And then understanding that, I could get along with anybody. And so when I moved through technology, of supporting customers, it was so easy for me. And people couldn't understand why.
Yeah.
It came from hospitality. It came from the restaurant business. It came from being in that kitchen, dealing with the waitress that wanted to throw a bowl of soup at you.
When I was at La Bernardin, I remember there were about 20 languages being spoken in that kitchen at one time.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And I didn't speak any of them.
Wow.
I barely even spoke English at that point. And I'll tell you, there's nothing like being in a situation where everyone has the same goal and we're all moving forward at this kind of breakneck pace.
Yeah.
And we're communicating through actions and emotions. And that's how we were moving forward. I remember when I was there, this was before Eric was a Buddhist, chefs would go out into the alley behind Le Bernardin and they would smoke a cigarette before service. And there would literally be kids throwing up from stress. That's how we were working. That's where we were. And it was like, hey, man, don't worry. You're going to get through it. It's going to be fine. We're all going to get there together. And I remember I was the first person. I'm not really good at, I don't have a super good recall when it comes to knowing what's on the board. And that restaurant was all no tickets. Your station had no tickets.
Oh, my God.
So they called everything, right?
Oh,
and
wow.
You're calling 3 different tasting menus and they're calling order fires.
Wait, well, nothing's written down or?
The only person who has tickets is the chef on the pass.
Oh my God.
And you have 7 different stations. So basically what I learned to do is I took a piece of tape and I put a piece of tape up on the stainless steel.
Okay.
And I wrote the number, like the dishes that were on my station. And that way when they called them, I would just mark them just so I had something there so I could do it. And honestly, one of the sous chefs came over to me. He's the chef de cuisine. He has been for a long time now, Chris. And he like looked at me and he's like, "You're not going to be on tuna for very long if you keep acting as smart as you are."
Wow.
And I was like, "I'm not smart. I'm so dumb. I have to write down tickets." And he's like, "Yeah, but we've been open for 25 years and no one's done that."
Wow.
And I'm like, "Okay, cool." So like I was the first one to put that there and do that. And it saved my ass so many times. And every single station I went to, I would do that. So I'd have my own like little board. It's like figuring out things like that and then watching the other cooks copying me, right? Yeah. So they would be like, "Look at that, works." And I would look at what they're doing when they're cooking. I'd be like, "Oh, that works." And so learning different things from different people, it's not all about cooking food. It's about how you work, how to
how to do
all these things.
I realize where this comes from. It really does come from the restaurant business for me, because my wife's like, "How can you think about all these perspectives of other people?" Yeah. And you know what's amazing is when you go into a situation, I don't know, we had a hotel room that was double booked and smoking, and we don't smoke.
Yeah.
So I had a conversation, not an argument, with the head manager, and he comped it. If I was arguing with him, he wouldn't have comped it.
No.
So it's like this skill that you develop. It's so powerful, you know, that people in the restaurant business have this amazing skill, and they don't even know it.
When you're in the service industry and you're part of a team, the empathy you have for other people who are put into those situations, like that hotel manager, most likely it was your empathy towards him.
Yeah. And he read it right away. He knew that I was not bullshitting him.
Yeah.
He knew that I was trying to make his job easier. It happened so many times in my life because I try to understand where other people are coming from. I'm not the difficult customer.
No,
never have been.
You're definitely not a difficult customer.
I know. I've heard stories about some of your difficult customers.
You know what? So many people get to that point where, you know, the kitchen is such a drag when it comes to your personal life and your ability and everything else. And I'll be 100% honest. I lost my 20s and 30s to the kitchen.
Wow.
And I really did. I really dove in super hard and committed myself to, it was like the one thing I committed myself to in my entire life. And it's something that if I had to do it all again, I definitely would. I probably would have made better decisions. But I really think looking back on it, if I wasn't as obsessed as I was, I wouldn't be where I am today. And so many people make the wise decision to step out of the kitchen and to have a normal life.
So as we wrap up, Esther's Kitchen, one thing I noticed is that your ingredients are locally sourced.
A lot of them are, as much as we can. But, you know, local is such a weird term because, you know, we're only 250 miles from Los Angeles. Okay. And the best, you know, so actually a lot of our product, I actually don't use local sourcing as in from Las Vegas. I use companies like Melissa's, who actually drives my product from Los Angeles every single day.
Wow.
West Coast Prime Meats with John Ward, who's been my meat purveyor for over 10 years. And he's the best. And like, he knows my quality standards and they're willing to work with us. And so we actually get a lot of product that a lot of Vegas restaurants can't get. And then we also work with a couple of different farmers. We work with Stu and Dragon and Carrie, who are all foragers who they go to different farmers markets in Los Angeles, Northern California, all the way up to the Ferry Building in San Francisco. And they bring us product every single week. So we have 3 different foragers that bring us product once or twice a week. So on top of getting our baseline good product that we use every day, we also supplement that with extraordinary product that's super seasonal. Like we have this girl, Laura, who's a citrus farmer down in San Diego, and she just brought us 30 pounds of fresh yuzu, 30 pounds of fresh bergamots, which is like the rind of the citrus that they use to flavor Earl Grey tea, you know, kumquats that are just like so fresh and perfect, and they're grown with such love. And she grows specifically for 5 or 6 different restaurants, and we are just one of the restaurants. Like she provides the Addison and San Diego with some of their citrus.
Okay. Wow.
and Chef William Bradley is an absolute inspiration, so it's really cool to be able to work with farmers who have that kind of pedigree.
Yeah, that's amazing. And lastly, too, you gave us an amazing tour of behind the scenes of the new restaurant, I guess, is it an expansion to Esther's, or is that right?
We're just moving.
Okay.
Yeah, we're expanding. I mean, next door.
Okay.
But we're going from a total of 2,100 square feet to a kitchen and restaurant that is a total of, 10,500 square feet.
Yeah, just the equipment, my eyes were popping out. Yeah. I was like,
they should never give me any money. It was a bad idea.
But
yeah, I can spend some money on equipment.
But you're also going to host a farmer's market there too.
Absolutely.
And that's amazing. So you're going to bring exposure to them, which
we're actually hoping to get some of my favorite farmers, Alex Weiser, Phil McGrath, Romeo from Coleman Farms, the Garden of Letty from Garcia Farms, Miguel from Far Hills, and a bunch of other of my favorite farmers. And we're actually going to invite them to come out and be a part of our farmers market.
I love it.
For, even if it's just for 1 week, to have like special people. And then we're going to work with Gilcrest and some local growers, some urban farmers, and have them kind of fill some other things in. And then I'm letting my buddies they started a dog treat company called Las Vegas Pet Treats or Dog Treats or whatever.
Cool.
They're going to come out and have a little stand there. And we're just going to do this as a community thing. I'm not charging the farmers anything.
That's my wife and I were talking about that, and I'm like, that is incredible. That's just so cool, man. Giving it back.
Yeah, and we're going to do it from 8 in the morning till 1 in the afternoon, and whatever they bring that they can't sell, we're going to do our best to purchase a lot of that to make sure they don't have any waste. And I know they have other farmers markets they go to, but I think like where we are in the Arts District, it's something that our community could really use. And I think it'll be such a draw. I even told, the chefs from 1228 Main, the Wolfgang Puck restaurant down the street, that if they wanted to sell bread, they could just come through and they could set up a stand and sell bread.
Oh, that's so cool. I love it.
And because their bread is fantastic. Yeah. And I think it's one of those things where that's the kind of community orientation that our neighborhood's going to need moving forward.
Yeah. I've had some really incredible chefs on around the world, but this one's really special because it's connected to family.
Oh, thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate you having me on. That's really great.
And then the last thing is, how do we find you?
Social handles are at Esther's Kitchen LV. There's an H in Esther, ESTHERS. That's a big one. I'm easy to get a hold of. I'm usually in a restaurant every single day.
Okay.
I try to be in all 3 restaurants every day. Right now, our 3 restaurants are obviously Esther's Kitchen, downtown Las Vegas, in the Arts District at 1130 South Casino Center. And we're moving to 1131 Main Street, which is literally right next door. Then you have Al Solito Posto, which means the usual place. And that's our more East Coast red sauce Italian joint. And that is up in Tivoli Village, which is at 410 South Rampart. And then in that same shopping center, we have a little wine bar called Ada's. And Ada's is... I could talk to you for an hour about how amazing that place is. And Kathleen Cat, who's our wine goddess, and Jackson Stamper, who's the chef there, who started as a cook at Esther's years ago. And I just love working with those guys, and Chris and Adam. And we're just so lucky that we have such a good family of restaurants.
Yeah. And last, is there any special message that you have to our audience, your audience, any young aspiring chefs, like any advice or any special message you want to share?
My one thing that I would say to all young cooks and young chefs out there is embrace failure. Beat yourself up and be your own worst critic, but understand that if you're not failing, you're not growing. And if something is too easy, challenge yourself. Continue to challenge yourself. As soon as you're the best cook in a kitchen, leave. It doesn't make any sense to continue in a place where you're not learning, right? And you're just going through the repetition. You need to continue to always ask yourself why you're in a situation, why you're in a kitchen. And if you feel like that there's more to learn, which there always should be, then you should continue to be learning. That's all you're going to do throughout your life is learn.
Brilliantly said. And thank you again so much, James. Thanks for joining us today. Follow us on Facebook. Find our website in the show notes. Subscribe on Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen. leave a comment with 5 stars, and stay tuned for the next episode of Voice for Chefs.